Ready, guys? All right, I'll call the work session for Glynn County Board of Education to order at 5:03, Ms. Pearl. This time, I will turn it over to Dr. Spence for the items of information.
All right, we'll start with Dr. Whitehead with a COVID-19 update.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And just providing you a consistent update that we've been sharing each meeting with the data specific to Glynn County. The first slide is our recent community transmission index. You'll see that and the local slides weren't updated at 3 o'clock, but the state ones that I'll share in a moment were. So as of yesterday, community transmission in Glynn was at 71. Our last meeting on October 6th, it was 395. So that just gives you some context from where we've been to where we are today. The next slide is the 7-day rolling average. As of yesterday was 3.9. And November 3rd of 2020 was 15.4. So that gives you a year-to-year comparison on that one, that you can see where we are on that 7-day rolling average. The next slide shows you how this is the tail end of where we were with Delta, and our today is all the way to the very right. We had 5 cases reported for today, and the 7-day rolling average is 2.4. As of today in Glynn County. And then the graphic on the right again is just to show you the whole from the start till now with COVID, what it's looked like in Glynn County. The next slide is referencing our data that we're receiving from the Department of Public Health at the first of the week. This chart shows you cases by age overall. And then the next slide shows you our school-age children, which is the report that we've been requesting. And you can see where we are, the last column being the totals all together. But since they started tracking it, the October 30 ending of the week, last week, we were at 9 school-age children in the entire county. Those aren't just Glynn County school students. So just gives us some context for the reports that we're receiving from the schools to help us determine if that looks like it's in line with what we should be expecting across the system. The next slide is just our percentage of positive tests, those people testing positive, and you can see how that's moved down, and it's had a little blip up and down. Those percentages are changing just based off of, again, the number of people that test and who test positive. Gives you some additional information there. The next one is one additional slide from DPH that we've been looking at that just shows you all ages over the past week, the number of confirmed cases that have been recorded at each age band. And then just looking quickly at where we were last Friday as a system with our percentage positive for the system. And again, this will be updated for tomorrow afternoon's posting as well. So I don't know if you have any questions about the data and where we are with things. Many schools have been planning typical fall activities. We've had fall festivals occurring, and they're having their guests come back into the building for the most part to bring activities that were pre-COVID type activities back in, and of course just monitoring to see that those things are going well. I do know we have some student cases this week that look like, maybe an increase for our school, but they are mostly sibling related in the data that we're seeing this week.
It's one thing that Ms. Jordan said. She's looking at the data, she's looking at the spread, and she's saying it's happening in houses, not at schools. So. Any questions for Dr. Whitehead?
So is everybody back? You said for the most part, are all our schools back to parents coming in for meetings? And I had a mom call me the other day because her daughter was getting an award at one of the spirit rallies and she couldn't go. So is everybody back to letting people come in or no?
We got a call last week, and it might have been that one, but I got a call from someone, and we did communicate to all the principals that we needed to be consistent and start letting parents come back into our building.
This one was Oglethorpe. I don't know if that was one, yeah.
But we have communicated to the principals that we do expect the parents should be coming back into the buildings. And non-essential visitors to me is like vendors and things like that, not parents.
Sure.
I think parents are essential.
Yeah, that one is, I mean, that's a big issue because it's important to parents, but the one I called you about was not being allowed to come to a 504 meeting and stuff like that. So we need to make sure everybody's allowed to come to,
Yeah.
Right.
especially stuff like that.
If they want to have a live meeting, we
Sure.
certainly want to
Okay.
give them the opportunity to do that, especially while the numbers are so low. And hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
It's good to see.
Yes,
It's kind of strange that strep and the flu are back, though.
yes,
I mean, I've heard of, 10 people in the last week test positive for strep.
yes.
And last year there was 4.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Whitehead.
If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and cover an item that's on the bottom.
Go ahead.
One of the proposed action items toward the bottom, it is, I'm sorry, it's E.
3E.
3E, is request to hopefully get approval next week for Dr. McKinnon and Dr. Gabriel to move forward with scheduling a trainer from the Institute for Multisensory Education to come during a week of PL that's being planned in June that'll provide options for teachers to come in. But by bringing the trainer in, even though the cost is between $50,000 and $60,000 to train the teachers, it would allow us to have a bigger reach and be able to train more teachers than trying to send teachers out to that training and not be able to impact as many classrooms that way. And so before they commit to having the vendor send trainers in for that, we wanted to bring that ahead for approval. So I don't know if you have any questions particularly about, you may have heard about Orton Gillingham strategies that are in schools to help with literacy, and that's what they would come and train our staff with.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next I have Ms. Preston, Ms. Miller, and Dr. Green.
So I asked Leslie Scarborough, the Title I Director, to give me her budget summaries on the different CARES Act, because I know you guys are getting questions on it. So the first one you see was the first allocation we got of 3.4, and we used salary and benefits for that out of the general fund to offset the austerity reduction that was reinstated into this school year. So that's pretty much spent out. You'll see that the private schools still have a little bit left to spend, and they have in carryover for them. So that hopefully they'll spend that, and that'll be spent out. But our part is already spent out and done. CARES Act 2, that allocation was 14.3. I tried to condense some of this so you could see it all on one page and just kind of highlight some of the big things that we're doing. We can use it for substitute pay when someone's out for COVID, so we're doing that. When the state gave us $8 million for bonuses for everybody last spring, there was probably about 20 to 25, 30 people, I can't remember, that didn't qualify, so we could use this CARES Act money to pay those people, so everybody got the $1,000 bonus. We're using it for on-demand tutoring services for our at-risk subgroups, buying some supplemental literacy materials for the Calkins units. We used a lot of CARES Act 2 for technology. You'll see where we bought headsets for the testing, Chromebooks. We did one round and then we bought another round. Promethean boards, which they are all sitting in trailers at transportation right now, and we just started installing them at the different schools. So we'll have Promethean boards in every classroom in Glynn County. We're also using CARES Act 2 for our virtual high school, those students that take classes online through the state. Centigix, you've heard us talk about that. A lot of cleaning supplies out of 2. And then another biggie is the buses. We were allowed to buy buses if it was above and beyond your current fleet to help social distance. And then the other major component to federal grants is indirect cost. I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about that. But every county has a calculated indirect cost rate, and that represents the cost of doing business, basically. So, like the cost of people in my office that pay bills, that do payroll, that do the completion reports, the grants, accountant work, HR who hire people, benefits person. So you're allowed to charge a federal grant based on your approved rate, which that rate changes by year. And you'll see on this, the FY21 rate was 10.62%. So in FY21, 10.62% of the expenditures for FY21, we were allowed to recoup back in the general fund. It's like charging a fee to a different grant, just like we do our workers' comp. We're self-funded for workers' comp. So the expenditures in FY22 will get calculated at a 14.29% rate, and then for 23, we don't know that rate yet. So that's an estimate of 1.8 for indirect cost. Are there any questions on 2? Um, 3 was 32.2 million, and if you recall, they allocated the first 65%, and then the state had to apply for the balance to the feds, and if they got approved, then we got the balance of the 32, and we did. But the stipulation for CARES Act 3 was you had to use 20% of that money on learning loss. So everything you see in green, it's not very dark, is it? It's like the first half of the page, all the way down to federal indirect cost. That is all qualifies as learning loss. So we were required to spend at least 6.5 million on that, but we're spending about 19.2 on learning loss. So obviously our main focus is the students and getting them caught up. This grant we use to help the schools out with staffing. Every school got 2 para positions. We also hired 49% resource teachers and have spread them out. We've added 2 social workers and 2 psychologists, an IT person to help with all the new Chromebooks we have, repairs. And then FACES and Burrs Millette have always shared a nurse, and so we hired a nurse for the FACES side with this money. And again, all of this staff is just while CARES Act until it expires, so it's for 3 years, 3 solid years. So the numbers you see over here are projected out for the full 3 years. We've sent a lot of CARES Act 3 on resources, and we have a lot of plans for professional learning. We also gave the schools like pots of money for them to come up with ways to spend the money for their students based on their school improvement plan. So it all has to tie into that. It's not just, random purchases. A lot of Eureka Math. So a lot of curriculum material went into eSPLOS 3.
CARES Act.
Sorry, 3. Yeah, eSPLOS. CARES Act. Jeez, I'm kind of retired.
We knew what you meant.
So, anyway, then some more cleaning supplies and things like that, but that's kind of the bulk. I tried to put in bold the biggies. And then the indirect cost for the big CARES 3 is estimated at about 4.6. So originally, when we first got these, they were talking about you can use this money for existing salaries and benefits to pay your teachers. And then when 2 and 3 came out, they started changing those rules. And initially, I was going to use this money for teacher salaries to save money in the general fund. But then when they started coming out with the compliance rules, I was not able to do that except for one, CARES Act 1, because in CARES Act 1, we got a cut from the state. So the indirect costs is our only route of actually being able to shift some of these funds to the general fund.
I have Ms. Miller and Dr. Green here in case you have any questions about the instructional things that we purchased.
And I would add too that we were able to hire Dr. Kelly Howell on as a part-time 49% employee, and she's overseeing all of the purchases for CARES Act, and she's following up and making sure that the purchases that are being made are truly being used in the school for what the school improvement plan called for. so they're not just spending money like Ms. Preston said on things that may not be used. So she's following up with schools and making sure that they meet their school improvement plan needs.
One thing that I wonder if will come out of all of this is we are identifying tools that really are making an impact because we are tracking these learning losses. So we can, have a better picture of what we could move forward with or should move forward with after the 3-year period. So it's good that we're monitoring and documenting that.
And
I went a step further, and I don't know if I didn't see it specified, but we partnered, I shouldn't say partner, we contracted Hanover Research as an auditor to do program evaluation because there
Yes,
are
it's on here.
It is,
Okay.
because there are so many different, it's down right under science kits.
Kits.
There are so many different programs and resources that we did want to have the research to support what we move forward with.
Yeah, I think
So
that's
we
great.
actually got a business or organization, a reputable organization to do that for us.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
We also bought the MAP assessment tool for the next 3 years, and that's assessing.
Any other questions? Thank you. Ms. Preston, you want to go to your
Okay.
stuff at the bottom?
So August and September 2021, you have the financial report in front of you. We had several budget amendments for those months. Budget revenues and expenses were increased by $4,200 to record an increase in the hygiene grant that we get from the state. Budget revenues and expenses were decreased by $170,800 to remove the school safety grant. If you remember me talking last month in June, I took it out at the end of June, and then what rolled over, I'm zeroing out completely in this school year, so it is gone now. Budget revenues and expenses were decreased by $11,800 for the residential facility treatment grant, which is a flow-through grant for the Morningstar program. Budget revenues and expenses were decreased by $50,800 to the state preschool grant, and revenues and expenses were increased by $3,000 for the GSBA safety grant. Year-to-date revenues represent 14.2% of the budget. Local taxes for August and September collected were 4.9%. Expenses represent 22% and were 25% as of September. And of course, my sales tax information is old news. July sales tax collections received in August in the amount of 2.9. August received in September 2.4. So August 2021 was 27% higher than August 2020. But September's 2021 was 18% lower, but that's because, do you remember me talking to you, we got an audit? They did an audit of sales tax over a 5-year period, and in that month, that year, we got $947,000. So if you take that out, it's actually an increase, but anyway. And then, so year-to-date, we're 1.08% over last fiscal year as of September. So Steve's going to talk to you soon. So we actually bumped up our revenue projections on our East Plus receipts to $2 million now a month, and we'll probably collect by July 2025, 6 months early, probably, or sooner if we track higher than $2 million a month.
All right.
Any questions on the financials? I have a low voltage bid that needs to be looked at and approved for Tuesday for Golden Isles renovation. Can you pull that out, Chris? And I cannot see that. Does that say 595? Oh, 93,000.
A little better.
Yeah. And then we have security cameras for Golden Isles renovation also that need to be approved Tuesday.
43,549.
And that's all I have.
Any questions for Ms. Preston? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Blackerby.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go up to the projects. As Glynn Academy, I'm just going to go through all the projects, if that's okay at one time. I'll start at St. Simon's Elementary over there, making good progress there. As of today, the footings and retaining walls were essentially 100% complete. We've got the underslab plumbing and electrical. Weather permitting will be done tomorrow. Hopefully, we're about 95% on each of those. The elevator pit is 100% complete, and we're hoping to have the slab ready to start the first pour on November 16th is our target date for that right now. So we're hoping for good weather up until November 16th so we can get that done. At Altama, still have some sheet metal work and gutter work that's ongoing, and we did the mechanical punch list this week on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So we're getting ready to close that out as well. There's still issues with furniture, which is just a supply chain issue. All the classroom furniture, of course, here, we still have some office desk and furniture that they don't have yet, but we've pieced it together the best we can so that they can continue to operate. The gym has also been occupied now. That was the last space within the building that was still outstanding, but the kids were able to go in there this past week, so all areas of the building are occupied at this point. With the Glynn Academy gym, we're on schedule there. All the roof panels have been installed, which will now let us start getting the slab prep for it to be poured. The classroom walls and electrical and plumbing has all been installed. We'll start working on the roof on that here coming up in the next week as well. At Golden Isles, we basically due to the HVAC equipment availability, which we don't have yet, we are not going to be able to get in their second semester. I've already talked with Ms. Renee, and she talked with the staff, which it seems like they were not eager to pack up anyway and move again. So, but we're hoping for a delivery right now of mid-November, which will be next week. Hopefully we'll have the equipment and can start installing that. The ductwork's being installed currently. We'll start painting next week. So everything will be progressing along, just waiting on the HVAC equipment, which is another supply chain issue. Needwood, we've pretty much finished the demolition on the entire wing that we're working on. Same thing, waiting on HVAC equipment there so that we can start installing the floors. We want to make sure we get the equipment in so we keep the building climatized before we start installing the floors. But work's progressing there. They're fairly well. It's a little bit behind Oglethorpe Point in scheduling, just because there's some more restroom and plumbing work that we're doing there right now that we aren't doing it at Oglethorpe. But at Oglethorpe Point, demolition's complete. Should start painting the classrooms next week. We don't have the HVAC equipment for it either, but it's not an issue holding up schedule because all the remaining work for it will be done in the mezzanine, so we can occupy the classrooms and do the HVAC work as the equipment arrives. So that's a general overview of those current projects. Any questions there?
I have a question. When you were talking about Oglethorpe, you're just working on one hallway right now. After this is complete, you'll have the others to do?
And Needwood is an entire hall, one hall. But at
Okay.
Oglethorpe, it's actually
It's
half a
half the
wall.
hall.
We built
That's
a wall down the center of the hallway, and we're working on one side. As soon as the work is complete, on that side, we'll flip-flop and go to the other side. So it's we were curious as to how that was gonna work out, but I was in there today. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of extra noise with the wall that's been built. Kids are a little bit intrigued by what's going on behind the wall. But it seems to be, out of all of the projects, that one seems to be the one going the smoothest, and I thought that was gonna be the most disruptive.
So for Oglethorpe and Needwood, when are we projected to be completely finished with that? I mean, I know it would be an estimate, but.
We were hoping to have the classrooms all finished by the end of the school year, so revolve through those classroom wings, and then do the office areas, gym, media centers in the summer.
Okay. So shooting for next school year being.
We're shooting for next school year to be essentially out of the building.
Okay.
Some of it's just going to depend on the equipment and arrival times of that, and hit unexpected things like paint availability and other things along the way too. So.
Okay, thank you.
Ready for me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you'll look at your multicolor report, yeah, so now let's go to page 2 to start with. Mike has covered the schedule issues and so forth. Wanted to point out a couple of things to you on this page. I'm on page 2. And at the top, this is called the active and completed project summary, and this is the way we've been doing it for 4, 5, or 6 years. I'm going to talk a little bit when we get to 4 about a little different approach that I've added for 4, and we'll talk about that when we get over there. But if you'll notice down at the bottom right-hand corner of these active and completed projects are still 15 million left in those to complete. And this does not include the Performing Arts Center and $1 million renovation project across the street over here. So there's another 21 million in addition to that 15 still in SPLOST 3. So you have that information. The next page is the same stuff. It's just broken down by construction category. And then on page 4, you will see that we've got our receipts again. Again, we're right at $2.5 million. You know, we started budgeting $1,750,000. We changed the budget a few months ago to $2 million, but this is the second month in a row we've been at 2.5. And if you look over at page 6 of 9, you will see the chart that covers the current, which is the red line, the budget, which is the lower dotted line, and the blue, which is last year's receipts. And I think Mike may have mentioned to you last month that $3 million last year was an annual adjustment that Department of Revenue did of about $998,000. That's why that spiked up to $3 million. That wasn't that much receipts. It was actually closer to $2 million, but you had a DOR, Department of Revenue adjustment on that. Next page is the schedule. Again, Mike has covered all those, but you have the summary. And I would like to look at page 8 just briefly, which is different from the summary on SPLOST 3. That was the active and completed projects. What I've added here, active, pending, and completed. So everything in the whole program is on this sheet where it hasn't been on SPLOST 3 all along. Pending projects, projects not started, do not show on the 3 sheet, but they all do here. And you will see your next to last line on that page. You will see the active projects, and down at the bottom, that's the active and pending total. So that's the total amount of everything that you've got project-wise in SPLOST 4. Just a little different than the other sheets, and I just wanted to point that out so you have that. That's a running total of everything going on. On the spreadsheet that this is made from, they are hidden up at the top. And but when they become active, then we'll show them every month until they are completed, and then they'll go back to being hidden. But these are the active, and you can see you have started making some pretty good payments on SPLOST 4, already paid over $3 million, almost $3.3 million to date, counting some of the hidden projects. And those hidden projects are primarily your 2 gym floors that you did this summer. So there you go.
Any questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next I have,
Thanks, Steve.
Drive safe.
Oh, yeah, always.
you good? Yep, go ahead. 3D.
It's a vehicle recommendation for, I believe it's maintenance, transportation, athletic, technology, and food and nutrition vehicles. Most of which is replacing the older portion of the fleet. I know from a maintenance perspective, I believe it's 2005 models and older, and transportation 2008 models. And IT department replacing a 1994 van, I believe it is, and food and nutrition, their service trucks. These are all off of state contract. We have clearance from state contract perspective to order them, but we do not have a anticipated time that they might actually be available. But from the state contract itself, the window is only open right now during the month of November to place particularly trucks orders, and it will close again, and they do not anticipate when it may open again.
Any questions concerning the vehicles?
These are already all outfitted, I guess, that come in for the electrical trucks and all that, will already have the equipment and stuff on that they need, not the nuts and bolts, but they'll be outfitted with
They will have the required
paneling and dual can.
the bulkhead there.
Vents.
It does have some of the shelving in them, not all of it, because they like to build their own.
Build their own.
Yeah, so it's the warehouse ones, they don't have anything in them other than double doors on them.
Gotcha. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Haywood with the student behavior report.
Good evening.
Hey.
So tonight, Dr. Spence and I wanted to provide you with an update relative to discipline infractions, and we thought it would be fair to give you a comparison from the beginning of the school year up until November 1. And so what you see is the number of incidents that occurred during the FY18, 19, 20, 21, and of course this fiscal year or academic year from August 1 through November 1 of each of those years, so that you can have some comparison to where we are relative to infractions to the student code of conduct. And so just so that you can kind of have some highlights of what to look at.
We removed attendance-related issues, which is the
Yes.
bulk of it, and just went down to things that would happen in a school or in a classroom. So skipping, tardies, things like that, which would be the bulk of it, we removed that.
Yeah, we took those numbers out. And so, obviously FY18 and 19 were normal years pre-COVID. FY20, of course, started as a normal year, and of course we know during that year we left school unexpectedly in March, but those numbers would not be reflected there. FY21, we were dealing with COVID at the beginning of that year, and so we had relatively about 75% of our student enrollment in school. The other, of course, were provided with the option to go virtual. And then, of course, this year, FY22, we had that 2 week of long distance learning, or distance learning, excuse me, for our students because of COVID. So I'll be happy to answer any specific questions that you may have relative to what we've got.
So on this chart for the first 3 years, those numbers have the attendance related
No.
issues in it?
No,
They
ma'am.
don't either?
No,
No,
ma'am.
ma'am.
So there's like each of these incident descriptions is a state code. So when there is an infraction against the student behavior code of conduct, we have to align it with a state code. And so there is down like near the 33, 32, 33 in that area. There are 2 additional categories that we deleted, which were attendance related.
Okay.
30 and 31.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking at the drop from those 3 years to
Mm-hmm.
the next 2, because we're
Mhm.
comparing at the same time period. It's
Yes,
not like
ma'am.
we're looking at a year to
Wait.
part a year.
FY '21, we actually had about 65% of our students in school at that point in time.
Yeah.
And so those were students whose parents or student decided not to come to school but instead do virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So we had much smaller classes, much smaller, but we still had our same faculty and staff here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This year, the numbers are a little higher, but certainly not where they were. Now, these are the actual referrals that were put in and processed.
Correct.
So do we have a guess as to why we're seeing differently?
Why it's so low?
Yeah.
I don't. I will simply tell you this. When I became superintendent, in the first meeting I had with our principals, I talked about not using the tracking form and instead putting everything on a behavior referral so it's out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so at no point in time have I tried to limit the teacher's ability to do a referral and the administrator's ability to handle it. I don't have any idea why it dropped. I will tell you that as a principal, most of the time, my schools had the highest number of referrals in the system. And then sometimes, we had just as many referrals as the rest of the school system added together one year at Glynn Academy. So I have no idea why it's low.
Well, we got to guess. I mean, you know,
I've
you
gotta
can
guess.
not refer them. You know what I mean?
And-
So
and-
I mean,
and-
so
Yeah, go ahead.
now, you know, I mean, I know that. So we've been back in school, except for the 2 weeks we've been back in school, and so there's such a sharp decline. There's got to be a reason other than COVID, because we've been back in school. You know what I mean? So
I do have 2 reasons. One is we missed 10 days of school this year that we didn't.
well, that's part of it.
Yeah,
But,
and in FY '21, we started 12 days late, so you're dealing with that right off the bat. Second, at the beginning of last year, we talked about compassion over compliance. And we talked about, these kids have been through a lot, have compassion over compliance, and that might be a reason too, is the teachers are going, you've been through a lot, I don't want to write you up, I know you've had issues, we're going to try to work through it, instead of a write-up. So that could be another reason also.
I believe that also plays
Yeah.
into this year because we've had a number of students that have suffered tremendous loss.
sure.
We have children that have lost parents, grandparents, caregivers, and I mean, we're finding out daily about families that have been traumatically impacted by deaths. So I do believe that our staff is definitely taking a lot of that into consideration and trying to be more proactive in their approaches to dealing with discipline issues. Our staff just has done such a remarkable job of working with our families and with our kids in the fact that they also have been dealing with a lot as well. So, again, this is just through Monday. Things can change.
And October historically is the highest month for discipline referrals.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why, probably has something to do with Halloween and the fair coming soon, so.
I mean, the big numbers looks like, 33
Mm-hmm. That's the catch-all.
incivility, which is kind of what you're leading
That's
to,
the-
that
that's
we're
the
trying to
catch-all.
It's kind of the
compassion
catch-all.
over.
That's the catch-all.
Yeah.
And that's the one misbehaving in the classroom and things. And there's the way you define disorderly conduct is also a difference here.
That's
So if
right.
you go back to FY '18 and you see 434 disorderly conduct, I define disorderly conduct as that student is behaving in such a way that the teacher can no longer teach the class. We have to go get that person and remove that person. That's disorderly conduct. And so that could be, just my definition of that could be the reason in the drop there. But it should see more student incivility.
Mm-hmm. Typically, what we see is those numbers floating in those 2 categories because, again, as Dr. Spence mentioned, the way that individuals define disorderly conduct. And one thing we've also worked on as well is what does this definition mean? What does the state define as disorderly conduct versus student incivility? And so most of the incidents that happen are in the classroom, and those all typically fall in that student incivility category. So that number will typically be higher than other areas.
All right, so just for example, the two issues that I've talked to you about in the last week where students are using the B word and the F word and referring to teachers and being, so where would that fall in this chart?
It's in such a manner that the teacher cannot teach the class, it's disorderly conduct.
Yeah.
So if they're using that towards a teacher, that is disorderly conduct. That student should be removed and suspended home.
You know, something, and if it were me, you know, if we're trying to get at what I think some of the issue might be with this is that, is there a way to track, you know, referrals that are made by a teacher that aren't upheld? So I'm writing you up, and so, okay, it gets processed and it goes into incivility, or I'm writing you up and it's taken back to the teacher and it's been, this might be something you can handle in class.
Well, we don't have a paper referral anymore.
Well, what, you know,
Right, it's
so
on the
there's got to be
computer.
some way to accept or reject
Right,
referral.
it's on a computer, and one of the things that I'm going to do, or have been doing, is I spot check referrals, and I found one at a school, and I addressed it. I was like, why didn't you do something different than this? Because an administrator, we have a behavior plan, and then we have a behavior matrix that gives administrators
Right.
suggestions on what they should do. And in some instances, they may give them far less than what they should do, what they should have done. And so we can track that. We can look to see if the punishment fits the crime, I guess. We can also look to see if an administrator, if an administrator followed through with a teacher referral to see if something was actually done. But if they delete it, or if they say, no, we're not going to accept this, I can't answer that question. I would imagine from a technology standpoint, we probably have the ability to do so.
To go on Mike's point, this has been kind of a hot topic.
No.
Over the last couple of weeks.
I've heard from parents and teachers that they write somebody up, and we've heard this my 12 years on the board, and then they come back with no consequences, whether it's incivility or disorderly conduct. And obviously, they are being written up because the teacher can't effectively teach the class. The student may get better, but what's happening are the other students are seeing, hey, this kid just cussed the teacher out with no consequences. Now I feel like I can do it. And that's what I've been hearing more and more about. So I feel like we just have to be more consistent. And if you get written up, there's got to be consequences. I mean,
I agree with you.
and I'd like Mike's point of view that can we track things that are being written up that are either being swept under the rug or, just not having any consequences.
I think we
And-
can explore.
We can blame COVID all we want, and I feel like now is a pivotal time to really, push our discipline code.
I asked the teachers to complete a survey that I sent last Friday, and spent the better part of the last 4 days getting the data. I actually finished at about 4:30. Maybe this will help answer some of the questions, okay? Jürgen. So I sent this out Friday at 10 o'clock. I closed at 72 hours on Monday at 11 o'clock later, so folks, all of our employees had 72 hours to complete a survey. We got 840 responses from school-based staff. I did promise the staff members that no one else would see the actual individual responses but me. There seems to be a disconnect between central office and the actual teachers in the classroom. And so I wanted to do that because I didn't want anyone to see it. I didn't want the principals to see their individual responses, only me, so that I can hopefully gather the trust of our teaching staff. I also personally read all 840 surveys. I personally read all of their open-ended responses. So we had 644 teachers and paras, and those are the ones I really looked at because those are the people in the classroom that responded out of approximately 1,100. When you have over 50% of an online survey completed, that is considered excellent if you get that many responses. So we got an excellent response rate. So the first questions I asked on the first page that I gave you, and I asked 6 Likert score questions, and I used a scale from 1 to 5. So if you look at the first question, have you witnessed a change in student behavior this year? They scored it a 3.9 and that was going from I saw a big decrease to I saw a big increase. So 3.9 is pretty significant. And that would indicate that, yes, we have seen an increase in student behavior. This is from our teachers. And if you look at the first part where it talks about everyone, you got the teachers and the paras on top, you got other school employees on the bottom. So you can see that if you look at where it says increase, 67% of the folks said they see an increase. Those are classroom people, 64% outside of the classroom. So yes, we have seen an increase. And 3.9 on a Likert scale would indicate there's an increase.
Okay, let me stop you there for a second. If that's the case, it seems like there wouldn't be a significant drop in that number. It would be steady or an increase, maybe a little drop because we missed 10 days and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But there's something, I know you'll do this, but you have to drill down to the school level because somebody, and I'm picking on Glynn Academy or Brunswick Academy, but let's say someone with a large student population, okay, if they have a major drop, it's going to impact your overall numbers, of course. So I hope I know you're drilling down to if there's one particular school that has
In about 8 minutes, I'm going to be drilled down.
increase or decrease or whatever. So anyway, yeah, that doesn't match what that's saying.
Well, it does
So-
actually, because we have 905 this year and 757. That's a pretty good increase from last year to this year. Yeah.
This year.
But when you go back 2 years ago, it's not. It's a big decrease. I mean, it's a big. We have seen a big decrease in write-ups, and the teachers are saying there's an increase in behavior. So yes, you're right. This data does not match that
Right.
data. If you go back in the years past. So going to the next
Well, I'll say
question.
this one more time.
Go
I've
ahead.
talked to you on the phone. I've said it for 17 years. The fact that I don't think it matches, is really not the issue. The issue is that we find out why. I don't really care what the reason is, as long as we find out what it is and we figure it out. My personal opinion is that, without saying we're cooking the books. That's what that number says to me. The incivility, that number has gone up because they just make that one go away. Yeah, they were disruptive, yeah, but just go back to class, and that's my hunch. I don't know if that's true or not, but again, if this number was different, I might buy into a little bit more, but I really don't, based on the feedback you've got from
Right.
people that are in the classroom.
And I'm going to give you way more answers in about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
now.
okay, go ahead.
So, the second question, when dealing with student behavior issues, do you feel that your school administrators are supportive of teachers and staff? And I used the scale. If you look at the bottom for questions 2 through 6, I use not at all, rarely, not sure, sometimes all the time. And so all the time being 5 and sometimes being 4, they were at 4.2, which that shows me that they do feel supported. However, if you look on the far right column if you look at the percentages, teachers in support felt like no 13% of the time. So people in the classroom felt no 13% of the time they were not being supported. Wherever folks outside of the classroom, 2% said they were not being supported. So you can see there's a big disconnect between those two. If you go to the next question, do you believe your school administrators try to cover up? That's a 2.4, which would be not at all or rarely. So that's pretty close though to a 3. So that means there's some thought out there that they might be trying to cover some things up. However, if you look at the difference between teachers, what a teacher says and what a other staff member says, 33% of the teachers and parapros that responded felt like there was some cover up in the building, and only 9% of other staff members in the building. So that's a big disconnect. So
That's a significant
1/3 of
number.
our teachers and parapros relieved that they're trying to cover discipline up. Yes.
Well, and 22% say not sure
That's right.
of the teachers, so that's
right.
kind of
That's
like you
almost half.
said, it's kind of like a, maybe.
Yep, that's right. That's right. Does your school, and here's another thing. In our elementary and middle schools, when I became superintendent, we had what was called a tracking form. And one of the things that I found was that the teachers were completing these tracking forms. They were going to the office and nothing was happening. This was 2-3 years ago.
Right.
And so in lieu of a write-up, because of disproportionality, and I'm just going to attack it right now, we were hiding numbers, and that's just the way it is. because we didn't want to be disproportionate, we were using tracking forms, and people can question me if they want to, but that's what they were doing. And I told this to principals the first day I met with them, that I didn't want to see the tracking forms when you dealt with serious behaviors. The tracking forms should be for teachers to keep up with so I can track the student's behavior in my classroom, but not for using profanity at a teacher, not for fighting, and that's what was happening. And so we said, I don't want to use tracking forms anymore. Well, obviously, you can see that that was a 3.2, which means it's probably happening, and 42% of our teachers and paras said, yes, we're still using tracking forms, and 33% of others. So that's happening, and it shouldn't be. And I understand the intent, but the intent of a tracking form is for a teacher and a group of teachers to keep up with student behavior that is minor, not for student behavior that is disrupting a class where the teacher can't teach. That needs to have a referral, and that's going to start having a referral. Moving down, this is one that I felt good and then bad about. If you have an issue, do you feel comfortable speaking with your school administrators about the issue? That scored a 4.3, which is pretty good, which means, yes, most of our staff does feel comfortable speaking with school administrators. However, only 82% of the people who identified themselves as teachers or staff members said, yes, they do. 94% of the people who were not in the classroom. And you see there's continually a disconnect between the people in the classroom and the people that are not. Then the last question, if you have a problem, do you feel comfortable speaking with your district administrators? And you can see that very few teachers, 30%, felt comfortable speaking to the district administrator. And that's something I'm going to work very hard at to make sure. And I've got some ideas there. I think we need to be in the buildings more, not in an evaluative manner, but in a going to see, hey, how y'all doing? How's it going in here? Which I try to do that. It was a lot easier when I was principal at Brunswick High and Glynn Academy, but I think all of our cabinet, all of our central office administrators need to be in classrooms, not with a notebook and a piece of paper, but just to see what's going on and say, hey, you're doing a good job, so we can get to know the teachers. I also think that the fact that I took the time to do this survey and I kept the teachers' trust by not showing it to everyone except the results, I think maybe when we do this in the future, maybe we'll get more answers. Looking at the next page was my open-ended question. And I always end the survey asking this, and I always did this as a principal, what would you do different if you were the principal? So I said to them, what would you do different in terms of behavior if you were the principal? And there were, usually I take the top 3 and try to make changes, but here I took the top 2. And really only the top 1, because if you look at category 1, which was make no changes, admin is doing a good job, or blank, that took up 27% of the answers. But the big one, 34% of the people responded, 34% of the teachers and paras responded, consistency with consequences, review and update processes for classroom administration, and administration visibility. Those were the things that were consistent in 34% of the teacher and paraprofessional responses.
Well, that's the one thing that hasn't changed over the history of education is that, you know, being fair, firm, and consistent, no matter what you look like, no matter who your parents are, you know, that says a lot. And, you know, the last thing on the prior page, that gets to what your culture is that you're trying to change because folks are still scared to speak up, you know, and be honest, it's changing a little bit, you know. There's a little bit of a movement to speak out more about things, no matter what it is, but, you know, that's something we've really got to, that's the culture issue. That's the one we've been talking about for years and years and years. For sure.
Well, I took all the schools and I broke the individual school data down the same way that I broke the system data down, but I'm not going to put that out to public. And there are 2 or 3 schools that stick out, and when I mean stick out, they really stick out. And so we will address those 2 or 3 schools, and we will help them work with their teachers to create a plan that's beneficial to that school, as long as they're sticking to what our plan is. And then we're going to review our matrix and our behavior code that we have to make sure people understand and are following it. So, you know, one thing about it, we've dealt with 3 months out of school back in March of 2020. Last year was back and forth, not many kids in school, then they started coming back. But we're having a real school now, and we're starting to see some of those real issues that we haven't seen in 2 years. So yes, you're right. And yes, there are issues, in especially 2 or 3 of our schools that had just stick out like a sore thumb when I did the survey.
Well, and whether it's your philosophy as a parent or a teacher or an administrator or whatever else, I feel like, you know, when you come back, except for the social, emotional things we've been dealing with, loss and that sort of thing, that's a different animal. But when you come back to school acting out because you haven't been in school, that's the time to buckle down. Not to say, it's going to be all right, go back to class. You know, that's when you can always back off a little bit, right? But when they come back and you start out lax, it's harder to ramp it up, in my opinion. So I feel like if you buckle down to start with, and you're consistent and fair, then I think that's the right approach. But that's just my opinion.
You know, one of the things talking to some of the principals and some of the teachers that I've known for a long time, it was very hard to start school, go 2 or 3, 4 weeks, and then stop. And then to be out 2 weeks, whether we say we're virtual or not, we all know that that's not near as good as being face-to-face instruction. And then start again, it's almost like they had 2 starts to school. And that's difficult. That's difficult for administration, that's difficult for teachers, and that's difficult for parents and students.
But this is not new. You know, we've been talking about this information for a long, long time. There's been the same inconsistency since we've been way before COVID or anything else. So I'm glad we're trying to address it. And you know, with the disproportionality thing, I think it's an issue, and I think it's an important issue that we need to continue to look at. I really do feel that way. But I think that we need to be fair and consistent. And I'll say it again, I've said it just about every year, anytime we look at this data. If we get dinged by the feds or the state or something for the way our numbers look, I'm really okay with that. I mean, our special ed programs are, I feel like, pretty top notch. I think people come to Glynn County because of that. And I think it's wrong for the government to penalize our system and move those funds, but for goodness sakes, we've been sitting here talking about 30 minutes ago, $30 million, $50 million, however much, you know, we're moving money around and making things available. I don't think we're going to none of us would. It's like when the economy got bad, we didn't get rid of music or art or nurses or anything else. You know, we made that happen and set priorities, and I think special ed is definitely one of those. And just because they make us shift some money doesn't mean that I would rather have true, honest numbers, you know, and deal with the consequences that way than try to fix it, try to fix the numbers to not lose a little bit of funding. You know, we're the beneficiaries of a giving community and an affluent community, and I think they will understand if we're doing that. I mean, when I've got teachers calling me that have been teaching for, you know, 15, 20 years and talking about quitting, that's the problem. When you don't have that much time left, you're that close to retirement, and you're really just thinking about giving up and leaving all that behind. That's disheartening to me, and I'm sure it is to y'all too. But with all that said, I would like to, and if it's not by the next meeting, I understand it won't be by the next meeting, but in December if we could, I'd like for us to reach back out, and I want us to at least get a quote or talk to somebody about what it would cost to reinstitute the STAR program in the middle schools and high schools as an agenda item if I could. Kids right now, when they get sent home, and it's really the fault of No Child Left Behind, in my opinion. Kids know that you can't and won't fail them, right? So you get sent home for 5 or 10 days for fighting. Well, guess what you get to do? When I got sent home, or you got sent home, when we were in school, we got zeros, right? You got consequences. You got consequences at school and at home. Now you get to make up your work. You get home for 10 days, and it's like a mini vacation. You come back to school, everything's fine. You don't not graduate, right? I remember fighting the fact that we wanted to have it where if you missed 5 days unexcused in one semester, you failed. Well, we can't do that anymore. The courts say you can't do it, which I think is baloney, but that's what the courts say. So where we can crack down, I think that we should. And if a child acts out rather than send them on a 10-day vacation, I think they should be at school doing something to make that school better. And that's just my thought.
There are many alternative consequences that we could come up with. The easy thing for an administrator is to send a student home. But you take a kid out of a basketball game for three games, and that's a serious consequence to that child. Much harder than sending them home. So we have to find things that work for consequences rather than taking the easy way out and sending them home. But you are right. We are held under many, many laws that folks don't realize. Just how many laws we have to be held accountable.
But if you're going to do that, you're going to have buy-in from coaches and band
That's right.
directors and cheerleading
That's
sponsors
right.
and PTA.
Right.
You're going to have to get everybody to buy into that, because the first time a coach says, I got to have him,
No, you got to be consistent. That
right,
goes back
then
to
you
what the
lose, then
teacher
you lose
said.
credibility for what you're
Right.
doing.
That's right.
And if you lose a game because of a kid, then that's a strong life lesson.
Right.
If you miss a competition or whatever else. But it's really been going on too long without a consistent address to the situation, in my opinion. And so I think that we can say all day long that we support our principals and teachers, and we do. I mean, I don't mind if the numbers go up. I would like for that number to go up, because that will let me know that we're being tough, we're reporting everything, and then we can figure out what we need to do to make things better. We don't want to encourage bad behavior, but we gotta know what the numbers are so we can address it.
That's correct. I will close on this. Almost every time I hired a teacher from another county, after the first month or two, they would come to me and say, "These kids act so good here. I can't imagine how well behaved these kids. They're just so well behaved," and that's the truth. And so, I mean, I'm just telling you, that's the truth. The people who come from other places cannot believe how well behaved our students are, and that's just from me as a principal hiring teachers from out of town. So, while I know it's tough, and I know our teachers feel bad, and I know the numbers don't look good, we still have a great school system, but we're going to make it better.
That's all we want.
I'd actually like to see an action plan of something that, what we're gonna do differently. Because we've talked, like he was saying, we've talked about this many times, the numbers have done the same thing in other occasions. And it just, if you look at the numbers, it kinda accents what the community is saying.
Right.
I mean, that's what it looks like to me. So we need to, whatever you feel like we need to do, but we also need to report to the community what we're doing, because that says what they're saying. It agrees perfectly, and I would like to see us at least report on it 3 times a year, 4 times a year, whatever it is, however you feel like it plugs in, but not be lost for a couple of years like we've had in the past.
I don't do that. I don't lose things for
And
a
you're a
couple of
numbers
years.
person, so
Yeah.
you can.
And let me say this, again, I finished this about 4:20 this afternoon, so I haven't had a chance to make an action plan, but I will get there.
Sure. And we have the time to do it, you know.
Right.
This is what's happened today, let's fix it for tomorrow.
We will. And I have, let's see, Ms. Miller with the review of the wellness program.
So, just real quick, the Food and Nutrition Department is going through an audit this year, and our wellness policy is in line with what the federal government says we have to have. However, the regulation that was attached to the policy had some things in it that we need to update. It was more restrictive than what the federal government required us to have. So Miss Daniel went, and if you'll look in the attachments, you can see what part she crossed out. She took out the more restrictive part and then added in the part that's in highlights. So it basically allows schools to sell food to students in addition to a school lunch, but this would be like snacks if principals want to sell ice cream in the cafeteria like they do at some of our middle schools and high schools. They can do so if fall festival's going on and PTA wants to sell popcorn, they can do so and it not impede against the federal guidelines. However, it has to meet this healthy food calculator. They have to plug in the nutritional value of whatever they want to sell or serve and make sure it meets federal guidelines for being a healthy food. Okay? So in order to do that, we have to just update the policy. Y'all don't have to vote on the not the policy, the regulation. So you don't have to vote on the policy or anything. It's just an update to the regulation. Miss Daniel just wanted y'all to be aware of it. And she's at a conference. She wasn't here. So.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Miller. I think that is all I have.
All righty, if that's all you have. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for land, legal, and personnel,
So moved.
And do we need to?
and tribunal review.
Yeah.
Yes.
Moved by Ms. Sams. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
Second by Mr. Halsey. All those in favor? It is unanimous. Ms. Gibbons is still on the computer.
Ms. Gibbons, you still on the phone here? Hello.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Dalla, second by Mr. Holsey. I'll move that we adjourn. You get a second, please?
Wait,
All in favor?
don't
We
we
gotta
have to
vote.
come back
Yeah,
from
gotta vote.
executive?
That's why I thought I just.
We didn't vote,
We didn't vote.
Motion's on the floor.
Slow it down.
Okay, entertain,
Motion's on the floor for
return to open session.
I seconded
You
it.
second
You
it.
second it. All
We
those
gotta
in
vote.
favor?
All in
Here
favor?
we
There
go.
we go.
There we go.
Sorry, it was 8:10.
That's your first time?
Well, that would be my last.
Almost.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Nobody say anything.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Sam, second. Mr. Okay, that was Mr. Mansell. All right, all those in favor? It's unanimous? Unanimous. At 8.